The wind carried no sound, only the hush of snow over an old truck's hood. Inside, a little boy slept, arms curled like roots. And his father, eyes dark with months of exhaustion, drove toward nowhere. The heater coughed, then died again. Elijah wrapped a threadbare blanket tighter around Micah's shoulders and reached over to adjust the broken cassette player. The lullabies played like a memory from a life that hadn't belonged to them in a long time. Soft, scratched, skipping at the same spot every few minutes. Micah stirred but didn't wake. His wooden truck was tucked beneath one arm, its wheels long worn flat from countless miles across motel floors, parking lots, and the dashboard of the truck they now called home. Elijah gripped the wheel tighter. His hands, raw and cracked, smelled faintly of old engine oil and firewood from a job he'd lost 2 towns back. They were always moving now, always searching. Since the eviction, they hadn't stayed anywhere longer than a few nights. Sometimes people smiled when they asked for help. Sometimes they didn't. Either way, Elijah had learned to expect very little, and to keep moving. The snow started slow, then thickened, folding itself across the world like a quiet sheet. High beams lit the falling flakes like stars frozen in air. The road disappeared beneath them, and still Elijah drove. They hadn't passed another car in an hour. Fields gave way to woods and woods to hills, and hills to a kind of nothing that felt like the edge of the world. Elijah's gas gauge ticked below a quarter. He cursed softly beneath his breath, just loud enough for himself. He didn't want Micah to hear, but Micah always heard. Then, faint, distant, impossibly out of place, Elijah saw it. Smoke, a thin, curling thread of gray rising from between. Trees just off the roadside, maybe a mile off. He slowed, peering through the frost-speckled windshield. The smoke didn't look like it came from a chimney. More like a low fire, something left behind. Still, it was something. He pulled the truck to the side. The engine ticked softly in the cold. "Buddy," he said gently, leaning back. "You stay here, all right? Blankets on, and play your tape." "I won't be long." Micah blinked, slowly awake, brown eyes drowsy but trusting. He didn't speak, just nodded and adjusted the truck in his arms. "Just 5 songs," Elijah said with a small smile. "That's how long I'll be." Micah lifted 5 fingers, then curled them back into his blanket. Elijah stepped out, the snow swallowing his boots immediately. The wind nipped hard, knifing through the flannel layers. He reached into the truck bed, grabbed the crowbar he kept beneath the tarp just in case, and started toward the trees. The path wasn't a real one. More like a memory of footsteps once there, long since devoured by ice. Branches clawed at his jacket sleeves. The woods were quiet, too quiet. Snow hung in the air like breath that never settled. And beneath that, the sound of dripping. Slow, steady. Meltwater maybe, or something else. He moved deeper. The fire, wherever it was, had dimmed, but the scent of smoke still lingered, sweet and bitter, like burning pine. He stepped through a thicket of ice-glazed underbrush and paused. A hush fell that didn't belong to nature. It felt like being watched, but not by danger, by sorrow. Then he heard it, not a scream, not even a word, just a soft, rhythmic sound. Like someone breathing through tears, he followed the sound. It took him to a clearing half swallowed by snow. Trees bent in like watching giants, and at the center, beside the blackened remains of what might have once been a campfire, he saw her. She was sitting on the frozen ground, barefoot, wrapped in torn layers of what had once been a wedding dress, lace, now soaked and fraying. Her dark hair clung to her face, streaked with ice, and around her ankle. A length of chain bolted to the tree behind her. Elijah's breath left him. The girl, no, the woman, did not look at him. She stared at her hands, fingers red and raw. The snow barely melted where her knees had pressed. She made no move to shield herself, no sudden panic. She only whispered something he couldn't quite hear, and somehow, that was worse. He approached slowly, dropping to one knee. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he said gently. Her eyes, wide, too wide, lifted toward him, and it hit him like a wave. She'd been waiting for someone. Not rescue. Someone. Maybe someone who never came. She blinked slowly. Like light stung. Elijah set the crowbar on the snow between them. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her lips moved again, but no sound came. Only a whisper, like the wind threading through bare trees. He moved a little closer. The chain rattled as she turned her body, trying to back away, but it held fast, too tight. The metal had left bruises like rings around her skin. "Okay," he said, raising both hands. "Okay." Stillness again. Her eyes softened for half a second. Then, with the smallest of nods, she let her hands fall. He reached carefully for the shackle. It was old, rusted, not locked with a key, but bolted. Who would do this? Why? He tried not to let the questions show in his face. He didn't want her to feel like a mystery. She was a person hurting, cold. "Must be killing you," he murmured and shrugged off his jacket. She didn't resist as he wrapped it around her shoulders. The smell of frost and burning lingered. And then he spoke again. But this time, not with caution, with honesty. "You okay?" She looked at him as if no one had asked that in a very, very long time. She gave the smallest of nods and then said one word. No, that was the beginning, not the moment they fell in love. Not the moment anything dramatic happened. Just one man, one woman, and a silence that finally cracked. Elijah pulled the crowbar into his hands and began working at the bolt. The chain groaned, metal grinding against bark and frozen steel. "Almost there," he muttered. She didn't move. Didn't ask for help. Didn't thank him. She simply watched. And behind that watching, something fragile, like a candle lit behind a wall of ice. When the bolt finally snapped, it made no sound, only a sudden slackness as the chain collapsed. To the snow. She stared at it, for a long time, as if it were the only thing that had ever mattered. Then, slowly, she touched her own ankle, not to stand, not to run, just to feel what it meant to be free. Elijah didn't speak. He reached out a hand, not forcing, just offering. She didn't take it, but she followed. One step, then another. When they emerged, from the trees, Micah's cassette had already looped. The lullabies had started again, and in the truck, a small boy sat up and stared. His father returned, with a woman in white. Snow gathered in her hair like a veil. Her lips were blue, her eyes rimmed in red. But in Micah's eyes there was no fear, only wonder. That night, in the cab of the truck parked beneath stars they couldn't see, Elijah wrapped her in every blanket he had. Micah curled beside her with the wooden truck between them. And for the first time since the road began, Elijah didn't drive. He sat in silence and listened to her breathe. The snow came down like breath held too long, light, uncertain, but constant. Elijah moved quickly through the drifted field, her limp body in his arms, her white dress trailing like smoke behind them. Micah pressed his face against the truck window, watching. His little fingers curled tighter around the edges of his blanket. Wooden truck tucked under his chin. The cassette player still hummed low lullabies, too slow for the pace of Elijah's heartbeat. He kicked open the barn door first, checking instinctively for danger, but found only frost-laced shadows and the breathless hush of old hay. There, near a forgotten workbench, leaned an axe. Handle cracked but firm. Elijah returned to the tree. The iron chain clinked faintly in the wind. He squatted beside it, careful not to jar her. She hadn't said a word since whispering for help. Her eyes stayed half-lidded, skin pale, fingers blue at the edges. It took 6 strikes to break the rusted shackle. She whimpered only once. Elijah didn't know if it was from pain or relief. He wrapped her in the canvas tarp from the barn, lifted her again, and began the long walk to the farmhouse. The cabin was older than it looked from the field. Half of the roof had caved in near the back, snow piling where a dining room once was. But the front, 2 rooms and a hearth, still stood strong enough to bear weight, and more importantly, fire. He laid her gently near the brick hearth and struck a match. The smoke pulled reluctantly up through the chimney, then accepted its duty. Flame kissed wood. Warmth began to grow. Micah entered on small boots, carrying the blanket. His eyes darted from Elijah to the strange woman on the floor. "Is she a ghost?" he whispered. Elijah almost said yes. Instead, he crouched to Micah's height. "No, she's real. She's cold and hurt, but she's real." Micah nodded once, eyes never leaving her. He moved to the corner of the room and sat cross-legged, wooden truck back in his hands, as if it might protect him. She slept for almost a full day. Elijah wrapped her ankle in gauze, gave her water spoon by spoon, left a dented bowl of broth near her lips. She stirred now and then, whispering things too quiet to make out, names maybe. Please, by morning, she opened her eyes fully. Micah was the first to notice. He'd been sitting close, notebook in his lap, sketching. When her eyes flicked toward him, wide and still full of a distant panic, he held his drawing up with both hands. "I drew you," he said. She blinked at the image, her face in pencil. Lines, hair cascading over her shoulders, mouth turned up in a soft smile. It was not a portrait of who she was. It was a memory Micah hoped they could make. Her lip quivered. Her eyes welled. She didn't speak, but she reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the corner of the page. They learned her name piece by piece, like gathering scattered stones from a frozen creek bed. The first word she said clearly was, "Anna." Not "my name is Anna," just "Anna," whispered like the wind had asked her. Elijah was sawing through collapsed rafters at the time, hauling the good wood to the hearth. He paused, straightened. Micah repeated it softly. "Anna." She looked at him, eyes glassy, then nodded. She wouldn't go near the mirror nailed above the cracked sink. Micah had to brush his teeth at the bucket by the window instead. Elijah eventually took the mirror down. No one asked why. She flinched when touched, even by accident. But when Micah crawled beside her one evening with his hair undone, eyes asking, she reached for him without fear. Her fingers braided his curls slowly, carefully, as if she were weaving rope from memories. Micah's eyes fluttered closed under her gentle hands. When she finished, she rested her palm on his head like a blessing. That was the first night she took food with them by the fire. Just bread and melted cheese. Her hands shook when she lifted the cup. But she stayed. She was choosing to stay. There was a rusted lockbox beneath a loose board in the cabin floor. Micah found it first, tapping through the planks like he was hunting treasure. Elijah pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside was a photograph, sepia-tinged, folded into quarters. A young couple on the porch out front. The woman's dress was simple. The man's smile was wide. Anna took the photo wordlessly and stared for a long time. Beside it was a yellowed letter, stained but legible. Anna didn't open it, and tucked at the bottom, wrapped in gauze, a sprig of dried lavender. She touched it to her lips before closing the box again. She never explained, but that night she sat closer to the fire than before. Micah drew again the next day. Anna holding a flower, hair blowing in imaginary wind. He colored the sprig lavender with the last of his purple crayon. When he showed her breath caught. She didn't cry openly. She held the paper in her lap and let the tears come slowly, falling like the snow outside, quiet and sure. By the third week, Elijah had patched the back wall with old planks and plastic tarp. He and Micah slept in the left room. Anna took the smaller one near the hearth. The wind still howled. The world beyond the woods remained quiet. But inside that crooked cabin, something like rhythm had begun. Elijah chopped wood each morning. Micah sorted nails and tools. Anna folded blankets, swept ash, boiled soup from potatoes and beans Elijah had bartered in town for an old jacket. They shared work, space, and warmth, without ever fully sharing the weight each carried, and that was enough. For now. One night, Elijah woke from a dream of deep water and silence. He wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and padded to the porch. She was there already. barefoot again despite the cold, hair loose, her breath made soft clouds in the air. She didn't turn when he stepped beside her. The moon lit her face in pale blue. She looked different in moonlight, not frightened but distant, as if she were remembering a life that no longer belonged to her. He didn't speak at first. The snow fell soft against her skin, collecting at her shoulders like she belonged to. The earth again. I used to think, Elijah finally said, that no one got lost on purpose, that it just happened, like bad luck or storm winds. Anna didn't respond, but her eyes glistened in the dark. Then, I wasn't waiting for you, she whispered. I know, Elijah said. A pause. But I came anyway. She turned to him slowly. Her lips parted like she might say more. But then something shifted. In her posture, not tension but release, she leaned just barely into his shoulder, not clinging, just letting herself rest. The snow kept falling, the world kept holding its breath, and in that quiet, Elijah realized she wasn't running anymore. The snow fell softer now. It had lost the frantic wind-whipping teeth of the earlier storm, and instead danced lightly across the window panes, a quiet hush on the world outside. Inside the farmhouse, the repaired half flickered with warmth and life. A hearth fire glowed. In the stone fireplace Elijah had coaxed back into service, and the air smelled faintly of pine smoke and old flour. Elijah knelt by the fireplace, a bundle of kindling in his hands. Split it along the grain, he said quietly, tapping the edge of a stick with a small hatchet. Like so. See? Anna crouched beside him, close but not too close. She watched intently, nodding once. She mimicked the motion, her fingers, a little uncertain around the hatchet's handle. The blade thunked into the wood, skewed sideways. He didn't correct her, not exactly. He just placed a steadying hand a few inches from hers, pointing with one finger. Angle here. You're strong enough? Just don't fight the wood. She tried again. This time, the kindling split with a satisfying crack. Micah, curled up on the rug behind them, clapped softly. She's better at it than you were when you taught me, he declared, grinning through a missing tooth. Anna gave a little startled laugh. It was a sound like glass shifting, fragile, unpracticed. She looked at the boy, unsure of what to do with the joy he threw so freely into the room. He beamed at her, unafraid, utterly at ease. That afternoon, while Elijah cut more firewood outside, Anna taught Micah to twist straw into tiny human shapes. He watched her fingers closely, marveling at how quickly they moved, deft and nimble. She tied string at the joints, shaped arms and legs, showed him how to weave thin bits of cloth for cloaks. These are warding dolls, she said softly. You put them near windows or doors to keep the dark out. Like monsters? Sometimes monsters wear regular skin. Micah blinked at that. He didn't ask her to explain. Instead, he picked up the little doll she'd made and gently set it by the windowsill. Later, he called her Miss Anna, then just Anna. And one morning, after a long night of dreams and a warm breakfast of cornmeal mush and wild apple slices, he ran up to her with something cupped in his hands, a snow beetle black and shiny, and said without thinking, "Look, Mama Anna, it's alive." Silence thickened. Anna's hands trembled and she looked away. Elijah froze by the door, holding a bundle of chopped wood. His eyes met hers, but he said nothing. There was no need to. The boy didn't even notice the pause. No one corrected him. That night, after Micah had fallen asleep with the beetle in a jar, and the straw doll propped near his pillow, Elijah sat on the front step sharpening a blade. The farmhouse porch creaked beneath him, old and groaning under the weight of frost. Anna stepped out barefoot, arms crossed, but her shoulders were softer now. The air was bitter, but she didn't flinch from it. He nodded toward her feet. "You'll freeze," she shook her head. "I like to feel the cold. It reminds me I'm still here." He didn't argue, just kept sharpening. After a long silence, she said, "The chain. It wasn't for punishment." He looked up. It was for protection. Her voice was brittle, full of weight. There was a night I wasn't myself. I was afraid I'd do something, so I—" She stopped, shook her head. There wasn't anyone left to stop me, so I did it myself. Elijah slowly set the blade down beside him. "This land," she continued, "was mine, is mine, once, my family's, my sister. She wore that dress to her wedding. She gave me the photo the day before the fire. I wore it after she died. Couldn't bring myself to throw it out." She glanced at him, eyes full of hesitation. "I stayed here when they were all gone. I wasn't ready to leave. I thought the house would forget them if I left." "It didn't," Elijah said. "No." She folded her arms tighter. "But I did." He didn't ask for more, didn't pry. "You don't owe me anything," he said, voice low. "We're just people in—" "The same storm," her eyes glistened. "What about Micah?" He smiled, soft and sad. "His mom left him. Left us. The day after he was born, she handed him to a nurse and disappeared. I don't know if she meant to come back or if she just knew she couldn't be what he needed." Anna nodded slowly. "Don't hate her," Elijah added. "Not anymore. I just hope she's okay." Anna stepped closer, just a pace, then another. She held something in her hand, a brittle sprig of dried lavender. She offered it, gently. "Put this under Micah's pillow," she whispered. "It keeps the bad dreams away." That night the wind returned, whispering through the cracks in the farmhouse walls like some old memory refusing to leave. Elijah sat near the fire in a wooden chair, boots kicked off, fingers slack with exhaustion. Micah slept in the cot by the far wall, his little hand curled around the edge of the quilt, straw doll tucked close. Anna moved silently, like shadow, laying another log on the fire. She turned, blanket in hand, and looked at Elijah, his head tilted back slightly, the fire's light painting golden across his jaw. She draped the blanket across his chest. Her hand hovered for a long moment. Then it touched his shoulder, just a whisper of pressure. Her fingers trembled but didn't pull away. The warmth between them was not heat. It was not even touch. It was knowing. She watched his breathing change, slow and deep. And then, in a voice like fallen snow, barely a sound. "At all," she whispered a name, not hers, his. And somehow, he breathed deeper, like he heard her. Days blurred. Small things mattered. Elijah showed her how to patch a leak in the roof with tar and patience. Anna taught Micah to whistle through pine bark and braid stronger rope from raw flax. When the food ran low, they scavenged together. Elijah hunted. Anna found edible roots and berries. She told them which mushrooms to avoid with a shake of the head. No words. She never explained how she knew. Micah made a new drawing in his notebook each night, mostly of Anna. One night he drew her smiling. When he showed her, she stared for a long time. Then she pressed the picture against her chest and turned away. She didn't cry out loud. Elijah once caught her in the barn, staring at the wall, unmoving. In her hand was the wedding photo from the lockbox. Her thumb rubbed across her sister's face again and again. He didn't say anything. She finally spoke. It was her fire. She started it. She meant it to be small, a ritual, a kind of release. But it caught the walls and she couldn't get out. Her voice was numb. "I was supposed to be there, but I was late. I always thought if I'd just come earlier." She didn't finish. He moved to her, standing just beside her but not touching. "She wouldn't want you to keep dying for it," Elijah said. Anna looked at him with eyes that had been dry too, long. "Maybe, but sometimes we build our own prisons." He nodded once, solemn. "And sometimes we break them, with rusted axes and stubborn hands." She smiled at that. Just a little. The days were growing longer. The snow softened underfoot. Birds returned. First just one or two, then in clusters. A fox appeared near the tree line one morning. Micah named it Alder. Anna started humming while she cooked. Not every time. Not even often. But the sound was real. She began to look in mirrors again. Not long. Just glances. She never wore the dress anymore. One night, Elijah fell asleep in the chair again. Anna tucked him in with the same blanket. This time she sat beside him a while. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. When his hand twitched in sleep, hers reached out and held it. Outside, the wind didn't howl anymore. It sighed, like the house itself had decided for the first time in a long time that it was safe to rest. In the stillness just before dawn, she stood barefoot on the porch again. The sky was soft lavender, snowflakes spiraling lazy through the air. Elijah stirred behind her but didn't rise. She watched the tree line. She didn't run. Not anymore. The cold kissed her skin, and the silence didn't feel heavy now. It felt, to be honest. Behind her a child stirred in sleep. A man dreamed in peace and a home, ruined and half-healed, breathed again. She whispered again, his name. And this time she smiled when she said it, like maybe, just maybe. She believed in the warmth returning. The thaw came gently. It didn't announce itself with thunder or storm or a gust of sudden wind. It simply arrived. One morning, the frost clinging to the windows didn't return. A day later, the icicles hanging from the eaves began to drip like clocks ticking down. Then the snow, once a vast white silence, turned soft at the edges and started to pull back like a tide. Micah was the first to notice. "There's grass," he said, pointing with both awe and suspicion, as if green were a trick of the light. Anna knelt beside him near the porch steps, where a patch of muddy earth had dared to peek through. A single sprout curled upward, defiant and small. "It's called hope," she said. Micah blinked. "That's a plant?" "No," she smiled, brushing the dirt with her fingers. "But sometimes it grows like one." The rhythm of life shifted with the season. Chores changed. Layers of clothes thinned. Doors were left open longer in the day, letting in the smell of wet wood and warming wind. Baby birds chirped from the rafters in the barn, and Anna placed breadcrumbs on the sill without a word. The fire still burned most nights, but its role softened, from necessity to comfort. Elijah began repairing the barn properly. He didn't speak much about it, just gathered salvaged wood from the edge of the tree line and brought it back like offerings. He patched beams, reinforced the loft, and added a new latch to the door. His hands moved with the steadiness of someone who didn't need to prove anything anymore, just someone who wanted something to last. Anna painted the farmhouse in long, slow sweeps, pale blue, the color of a sky on a morning full of promise. Micah helped in his own way. Sometimes that meant holding a brush. Sometimes it meant staying out of the way. Mostly, it meant running full tilt through the thawing fields with the floppy-eared puppy Anna found one morning curled in a hollow log, ribs thin but eyes bright. Elijah watched Anna more now, not with suspicion or curiosity, but with the kind of attention reserved for things that mattered deeply and could break easily. She still wore the old dress on warm afternoons, now with a patched apron over it. Her hair came loose more often. She hummed while washing dishes or hanging clothes, and when she spoke it was with fewer pauses, as if the world had stopped listening for her to fail. Micah had stopped calling her Miss Anna. Somewhere in the blur of days and dinners and shared smiles, it had become just Anna. And once, when he fell off the porch swing and scraped his knee, when she rushed to him, wiped his tears, held him close, he'd said it. Mama Anna. It wasn't planned. It wasn't corrected. She froze for only a second. Then, with tears slipping silently, she kissed the crown of his head. "I got you," she whispered. And Micah, brave in the way only a child learning to trust again can be, said back, "I know." Elijah stood by his truck one bright morning, bags in the bed, his hand on the door. "I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye," he said. Anna looked up from the garden bed they'd just started carving out of the thawing soil. She'd planted nothing yet, just tilled and turned and waited. Micah played nearby with the puppy, who now had a name, Salt, because Micah said she was tiny and nippy like the edge of a good soup. "You're not saying goodbye," Anna said, wiping her hands on her apron. He tilted his head. "Aren't I?" She walked to the truck slowly, pulled a folded paper from her pocket and handed it to him. "It's the deed," she said. "To all of this." He stared at it like it might catch fire in his palm. "I don't need it," she added, voice quiet. "Not if you're gone." He handed it back without even opening it. "Only if it's all of ours," he said. "We're not running anymore." Anna's eyes didn't shine. But they were wide, open in a way they hadn't been for years. "Then you better help me get these seeds in the ground," she murmured. Elijah smiled. "Yes, ma'am." Montage. Anna kneels with Micah in the garden, showing him how to gently press seeds into soft soil. "Cover them like you're tucking them in," she says. Micah hums as he does. Salt chases a butterfly. Fails. Tries again. Elijah hammers a new beam into the barn frame. Wipes sweat with the back of his hand. Smiles when he sees Micah wave. Anna paints the last strip of siding. She steps back, squints. She doesn't mind the imperfect lines. Dinner is outside now. String lights dangle from tree branches, glowing, warm against the soft blue of dusk. Plates clink. Laughter comes easy. Micah falls asleep in the porch swing after dinner, head tilted, arms around Salt like the pup is the only anchor he needs in the world. Elijah and Anna sit close on the steps, mugs of coffee steaming between them. The swing creaks slowly behind them. They don't speak, they don't need to. Above, the stars blink into being. Not shouting, not dazzling, just there. Anna gets up and disappears into the house for a moment. When she returns, she carries a small, worn box. She opens it without ceremony and pulls out a photo. It's new. In it, the three of them stand in front of the barn, Micah between them, Salt at their feet. Anna's smile is soft. Elijah's unsure. Micah's beaming. It's a little blurry, taken by the timer on the porch camera. She walks inside and comes back with another photo. Faded, older. A wedding photo. Her sister's. The frame cracked. At the edge, dust still clinging to its corners. Anna places the new one beside it on the mantel inside. A new beginning beside an old one. Not to erase the past, just to let the present breathe beside it. Later, as the stars settle into silence, she whispers, "I wasn't lost," she says quietly, voice almost swallowed by the wind. "I was waiting." Elijah doesn't turn. He just nods. So was I. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.